What does Kentucky Fried Chicken and Coca-Cola have in common? Well, apart from all the calories, they both supposedly have secret ingredients that have been locked away in a vault, never to be seen. And I kind of feel the same way when it comes to our next topic, which is executive presence. You know, when someone enters the room, heads turn, they have this, I don't know how to describe it, but people just automatically are attracted to them, and we've called that executive presence. Today I want to explore what is the secret ingredient, because I have successfully deconstructed it and made it into 4 simple ingredients. I think a lot of you know that I do executive coaching, and more often than not, during a review or after a review, I'll have a new client and they'll come in and they've got some different ideas for their development. And one of the things that often comes up is executive presence. And they look at me with this face saying, I don't know what that means. How do I grow it? I kind of think I know what it means. And you know, they're not alone. Executive presence is such a complex term. We kind of know it when we see it, but when it comes to breaking it down, it's like, well, how do you develop it? So today I want to break it down into 4 different areas and give you clues on how you may develop each of those areas. So the first area of executive presence comes from the very title itself. It's presence, because presence and the quality of our presence is incredibly important. I want to ask you a little reflection question. What's been the quality of your presence in the last week at home and at work? If you were to name some words, what would you name? Would you say at peace, calm, agitated, anxious, angry? What would be the quality of that experience? Here's why it's critical to know what's going on internally. Because what's happening internally will always out-trump what happens externally. So no matter what we try and do externally, if we're feeling anxious, fearful, angry, that's always going to show up on the outside. And so the first area is to know and be self-aware of what's happening internally. What's our internal presence like? And I think we do that through 2 different ways. Number 1, we learn to, in the moment, become aware of what we're feeling. So are we able to name the emotions that we're going through? As we go through different events through the day, are we able to be aware of the shift in our emotion as we go throughout the day? Now, one other area that's incredibly important as well is to be able to name our emotional triggers. We live in a work world today which is becoming more rapid, that is changing day by day. And so therefore there's so many different opportunities for us to be triggered. And so a great exercise for those who want to expand their executive presence is to reflect upon those triggers and how they show up, because that will help you take on their persona and express in the way that you want to do. I remember seeing this in a wonderful way at a meeting I was at a few weeks ago. So I'm part of a charity board, and there was a report there, and I could see that the chair of the board was visibly upset about this, was not happy with the report. But I could also see that they paused just a little, and then they began by asking a question. Now, when I talked to them afterwards, I said, you know, I may have seen something throughout that meeting. I think you were a little upset, but you were able to kind of change how you reacted. And they smiled at them and they said, that's a good catch. They said, actually, yes, I was very upset about that. But you know what I've learned? I've learned to stop, to breathe, and instead of immediately respond, to ask a question. That's a wonderful example of someone who is in charge of their internal presence, who's able to notice how that presence is changing, and who's able to modify it to serve them in the moment. The next component of executive presence that is incredibly important is warmth. Now, what do I mean by warmth? Well, whenever we meet another person, we have unconsciously a number of questions that are going on in the background. One of the questions we always ask goes back to our primitive days. Is this person a friend or are they a foe? Have they good intentions towards me? So part of a quality that people with really great executive presence is that they radiate warmth. People who are in their presence are able to feel the reality that they are approachable, they are friendly. I remember a coaching client from a few weeks ago talking about leaders that inspire them. And one of the qualities that they spoke about their mentor was that when they spoke to you, you felt as if you were the only person in the room, and they felt as if you could tell them anything because of their warmth. And so there are different ways to be able to express that warmth, both verbally and non-verbally. Non-verbally, the question to ask is, are we open? Friends are people who are approachable, so are our non-verbal signs that we are approachable? Approachable is, are we smiling? Do we give off that universal signal that we are happy and approachable? Are we making eye contact and connection with the person? Are we open in our whole body? You know, we're the only mammal that has our organs exposed. And so therefore, when we feel fearful, when we don't want to make connections, we often cross and we close our bodies. So people who are warm are able to open and they are approachable. And secondly, when it comes to verbal warmth, a person with great verbal warmth is able to draw out from another person through conversation and conversational style. They're able to put the person at ease. They're able to listen to the other person and draw out from the other person things that they want to say or even didn't think they were going to say. A quality here that's incredibly important is comfort with silence. You know, so often we feel that we have to fill the gap with different words. But people who are comfortable with silence can be present with the other person in warmth and let that other person begin to open up. So that's the second area, warmth. Third area is competence. What competence is answering that other question that people have when they come in the presence of a leader. Are they powerful? Are they able to get things done? And therefore, people with high executive presence are people who are able to display competence and confidence. How's that done? It's also done verbally and non-verbally. So non-verbally, that means someone who is an open stance, who stands erect, whose head is held high, who comes across as being confident, who has a firm handshake. And verbally, that means someone who is direct, someone who speaks confidently, who doesn't mumble. All of those are incredibly important when it comes to competence. So we've mentioned two things, competence and warmth. And the question might come up, which is more important? Now here's what's interesting. Some people are naturally warmer, I'm naturally warmer, and some people are naturally more competent. But what we need to do is develop both and then determine in the moment which one is better to express or to dial up. So say, for example, if you have to give someone bad news, perhaps they're losing their job or something, in this situation, it requires a little more warmth. Or if you're trying to show empathy to a person who's maybe going through a tough time, or who had a bad review, maybe warmth is required then. Whereas if you're in the middle of negotiations, or if you have to be taking control in an emergency, in this situation, it might be important to dial up your competence. So warmth and competence and knowing which one to use in a certain situation. The final area of executive presence that's incredibly important is communication. People with great executive presence are also great communicators. And what does it mean to be a great communicator? Well, as a leader, here are some things which I think are incredibly important. One is be succinct. You know, the sign of a great speaker, the sign of a great communicator is someone who's able to express what they are thinking or express an idea in a succinct way with clarity and not having to go all over the place. Whenever you're not able to express something with clarity, whenever you go round and round and round in circles, it diminishes your executive presence. You know, sometimes I work one-on-one with leaders and we do a lot around communication. And whenever I find them going round and round trying to express an idea, I always say to them, try and land the plane. Land the plane as quickly as possible. Get to the point. The second thing is filler words. You know, some people use more filler words, you know, like, but, such, that it diminishes as well their executive presence. Now, there are many ways of dealing with filler words. One of the ways that I like to say is to begin to slow down. Very often I think people have more filler words the faster they speak because the brain's not able to process their thoughts that quickly. A way of diminishing filler words for a presentation is to take your presentation and to practice it sentence by sentence, and at the end of each sentence, take a breath. Now, you're not going to deliver it like that, but it's a wonderful way of dealing and lessening filler words. And finally, in communication, be a storyteller. You know, stories are amazing for conveying a message. If you give a presentation and people walk out the door and you ask them, what did you remember about that presentation? More often than not, almost universally, they will remember a certain story. So if you're able to take your ideas and to plant them into the conveyor of a story, then that person is more likely to remember your idea. Presence, warmth, competence, communication. Those are the 4 elements that, if you work on them, will help you expand your executive presence. Now, if you've enjoyed the content today, please remember to subscribe and you'll be able to receive my latest video every week, which has wonderful content in the area of emotional intelligence and leadership. And if you've enjoyed the content today as well, you might be interested in watching the next video, which talks about the importance of emotional intelligence in leadership.